You are more than the sum of your parts. This workbook and video go together, so if you haven't downloaded the workbook, please do, because you need the workbook as we go through the video. If you turn to the first page, you'll see that the purpose of this video is really to review the data dynamics chapters, but particularly chapter 3, which is you are more than the sum of your parts. The benefit of learning about your whole self and the subsystems that embody your whole is to really help you understand the complexity of one person, that is yourself, in order for you to understand the intricacies of a partnership, or even more complicated, an organization, a society, or even the world. So it's important to begin your self-analysis in order to acquire fundamental skills of systems thinking. Later, you'll apply this knowledge and skills to more sophisticated tasks, such as analyzing organizational patterns and problems over time. So if you look on page 1, you'll see the objectives for this lesson, and you'll see that we have 6 of them. First, we're going to depict in detail the aspects of your physical, emotional, psychological, and spiritual self. We're going to apply the systems principle of input, transformation, and output to describe how you internalize external events, process them, and emit them back into the environment via outputs. You're going to explain why common psychological assessments are limited in terms of describing your whole self. You'll also be able to describe on a general level how an astrological chart is more reflective of a holistic viewpoint in comparison to a psychological measure, which is often found in the social sciences. You'll be able to clarify how purpose drives action, and you'll be able to detail environmental systems that surround you in order to acquire a deeper understanding of how environment influences your system through positive and negative feedback loops. So if you look at the lower half of the page, you'll see the outline that we will proceed in. So if you turn to the next page, you'll see that when we talk about systems, we're talking about a whole. You are a whole, and 4 main subsystems that comprise your whole are those that you see on the screen. Now, all whole systems are formed by an abundance of hierarchical subsystems that contribute to a complex network of interactions and outputs. So you need to understand how these subparts work together in order to comprise the whole, and in this case, the whole that we're focusing on is you as the individual. Now, as you learned in Chapter 3, your physical history, which is one of your subsystems, isn't as meaningful until you actually merge it with your emotional subsystem. So for example, let's say you had polio as a child. Clearly, the physical outcome of this disease is significant. But the experience becomes even more profound when we analyze how polio not only influenced you on a physical level, but also on an emotional level. Now, an author and renowned speaker who can give us a concrete illustration of the physical and emotional connection is Carolyn Myss. And she has presented a number of books and other materials on various topics. But one of the things where I find that she does a superb job is how the physical and emotional subsystems work together and emerge to manifest one's health. In other words, what a person emotionally experiences during life often results in energy loss or gain, and when it's a loss in a particular part of the body, it can later manifest as a physical illness. And she demonstrates this phenomena through chakras. So I want you to go ahead and listen to her introduce the chakras in this 8-minute video. So right now I want you to close this video and click on this link so that you can watch what she has to say, and then I want you to return to this workshop. Now that you watched the video, let's examine the chakras in more detail. So I want you on page 3 at the bottom to go ahead and click this link. And that's going to take you to this page. And here, this is a resource on Carolyn Miss's page where she actually shows the body and the different chakras. And as you move your mouse up and down, you can see what each chakra is. So starting with the 7th, so if you're feeling a loss of energy in the muscular system, the skeletal system, and the skin, that connection is of a spiritual nature, as you can see here. And the effects are energetic disorders, spiritual depression, chronic exhaustion that is not linked to a physical disorder, so it's more of a mental, which is where that chakra is coming from. And the issues, the emotional issues, are dealing with trust in life, values, ethics, courage, selflessness, ability to see larger patterns, and so forth. Here they also give you questions in terms of how to address some of those issues. So you can do that with the next chakra. If we go down to the 6th chakra, here the energy center is intuition, intellect, reasoning. It involves the mental abilities, the psychological skills, and here it's dealing with the organs of the brain, the nervous system, the eyes, the ears, the nose. And the effects could be, again, so these are the physical effects that might manifest as brain tumors, strokes, blindness, deafness. And then the emotional issues that really come from that chakra have to do with truth, intellectual abilities, feelings of inadequacy, openness to ideas of others, ability to learn from experience, emotional intelligence. 5th chakra. This is the center of struggle with choice and the ability to release the will of the divine guidance, so faith over our fears. And the organs that are involved are throat, thyroid, neck, mouth, teeth. We see that the physical effects might manifest in chronic sore throat, mouth ulcers, gum difficulties, swollen glands, and so forth, thyroid problems. And the emotional issues are really choice, strength of will, personal expression, and so forth. If we go to the 4th chakra, here it says it lies in the powerhouse of the human energy system. And here the emotional energy is love. The central organs are the chest, the heart, the lungs, the shoulders, and so forth. The physical manifestations might be heart failure, heart attack, could be asthma and allergies, bronchial pneumonia, upper back, shoulder pain, breast cancer. And the emotional issues that are being dealt with are love, hatred, bitterness, grief, anger, jealousy. Now, it may not be all of them, but these are some of the issues that could be what a person's dealing with, which manifests the physical aspect. So then we go to the 3rd chakra, and I'm going to let you go through this on your own when you get a little more time. But you'll see that here, this is dealing with the stomach, upper intestines, and the issue is where it's dealing with maturity and honorability in relationships, and it may manifest in arthritis, it may intestinal problems. We have the 2nd chakra. This is dealing with personal power, creativity, sexuality. The organs that are involved are the sexual organs, the large intestines, the pelvic area, and so forth. Physical manifestations might be arthritis, chronic lower back pain, menopause severity, and then the emotional issues are loss of control through events such as addiction, rape, betrayal, impotence, financial loss, etc. And then you have the 1st chakra, which is connected to all of life. The organs are the base of the spine, the legs, the bones, the feet. The physical manifestations might be chronic lower back pain, rectal disorders, depression, multiple personality disorders. Emotional issues include physical, family, group safety, and so forth. So when you get a chance and have a little more time, go through all these. It's really kind of cool to see the different areas of the chakras, the emotional issues, and then the physical manifestations of those emotional issues. So let's go back now to our workshop. So as you can see, there is a strong connection between your emotional subsystem and your physical subsystem. And clearly your thoughts, being your psychological subsystem, as well as your spiritual entity, are all interconnected. But those chakras really make it clear in terms of how what you're feeling is really manifesting on the inside as well. So if you're interested in learning more about those connections, then I strongly recommend The Anatomy of the Spirit, The 7 Stages of Power and Healing, and again, that's by Carolyn Myss. So whenever I'm feeling strong energy coming from my body, I often go back to the book Anatomy of the Spirit to see what emotions I might be dealing with that aren't necessarily self-evident. And I will give you an example of something that I experienced in the past. This time I'm going to go ahead and click the link on directly, since this is my video, and we'll watch it together. It was a regular day, just like today. The sun was shining and I was out walking my dog. But unlike today, 15 years ago, I had received bad news. My dog of 10 years was diagnosed with cancer. The veterinarian gave her only a few months to live. As I walked her around the park, I felt this pain on the left side of my chest. I remember thinking, geez, my dog has cancer and I have chest pains. At the time, I didn't know what the chest pains were from. Later on, after reading the book Anatomy of the Spirit, I learned that I was losing energy from the 4th chakra. I felt love and grief for my dog, who was predicted to die in the near future. And those chest pains were the physical manifestations of the emotions that I was feeling. So now, whenever I feel a physical sensation within my body that seems to be indicating a loss of energy, I turn to the book to see which chakra the pain is coming from in order to better understand how my physical sensations are intertwined with my emotions. As my story illustrates, the emotions, the mind, the body, they're all interdependent. Each subsystem is constantly inputting energy, transforming it, and outputting energy that influences these and other subsystems, such as your spiritual subsystem. And the outputs you emit go into your environment, which then influences other people's whole systems. Your mind plays just an important role to your overall health, as do your other subsystems that we were just discussing, the physical and the emotional. The next video that I want you to watch illustrates this mind-body connection. And so I want you to stop this video and go to the workbook, and on page 4, I want you to view the video about the mind-body connection and the scientific information that goes along with this connection. So to summarize the connection of these 4 subsystems, let's listen to another video by Dr. Johnson. He presents a 10-minute video where he does an excellent job really putting all the knowledge that we've discussed so far in this workshop into practical terms. So go ahead and turn off this video so that you can watch this 10-minute YouTube video and then come back to the workshop. As Dr. Johnson acknowledges, many people do not want to self-assess themselves because they're afraid of what they may uncover. Now, in order to be a successful systems thinker, you need to fully understand yourself in order to understand others, as well as larger entities such as organizations and communities. Therefore, the more time and effort you put into your own self-assessment, which is the homework that is going to be due in a couple weeks, the more effective you will be overall as a holistic thinker. Now, as you probably noticed, one important systems principle that is crucial to completing your self-analysis assignment is the concept of input, transformation, and output. So let's discuss this principle. It was discussed both in the Data Dynamics book and in the Systems book, so you should have a general grasp of what it is. But just to reiterate, this principle, what it illustrates is that all systems take in energy from their environments, they transform that energy, and then they output whatever they don't use. So a simple example is eating some type of food. The body transforms the salad by absorbing the nutrients and other byproducts that the body can use, and then what it can't use, it outputs. So that's what we poo out. Now, if you think about what happens if the body cannot discharge waste, what do you think will happen to the body? Toxins might build up, bloating might occur, and other negative consequences could occur. So if we use that same principle and we think of it in another scenario, such as a child who experiences a tragic event, let's say at school or at home, and feels emotions, but she doesn't know how to process them. Well, if you use the input transformation output principle, you would think that ideally the child would feel the emotions, she would process them into something healthy, such as lessons learned or greater emotional maturity, and then she would output this transformation into more positive behaviors, which would be helpful for her environment, because then people who interact with her would feel her positive energy and all would be good. But oftentimes the ideal does not manifest. And with children especially, but even with adults, there are times when they don't know how to process emotions. And then these emotions get stuck inside. And similar to waste being stuck inside the body, toxic emotions can also build within human systems. And unless and until the individual can transform these emotions, the feelings simmer inside, and often they influence the other systemic parts. Now, one might argue that individuals draw certain people and events to them in order to tap into these unresolved emotions that are residing within their systems, and it's just waiting to be transformed. So, for example, a man may attract the same type of woman, especially on an emotional level, into his life time and time again, not because she is necessarily his type, but because he is unconsciously trying to tap into these unaltered feelings that need awakening and transforming. Now, it may take many years, it may take numerous relationships for him to finally recognize and address this untapped emotional energy that's been residing within him for decades, but it really is waiting to be transformed and released into the environment as something positive. So transformed on the inside as something positive, and then released on a behavioral level as an output. Now, while this input transformation output principle is useful to explain how human systems act and interact, it's also helpful in understanding how organizations and communities act. And I give you an example on page 6 with Comcast. Now, back in the day, Comcast had a terrible reputation for customer service. And if you listen to this 40-second video, you'll see how the CEO explained their reputation in the past. So go ahead and shut this video off and go ahead and click on that 40-minute video and then return. So as you can see, when someone shifts blame to outside themselves, then you're not really able to tap into the energy that needs transforming. So in this case, the CEO was blaming something outside himself. But when he actually later on takes responsibility and recognizes that his organization does have a problem with customer service, or in systems language we might say that the organization had some unaltered energy that needed transforming, and the CEO began to input a lot of energy into the company, whether via policies or training, communication that focused on quality customer service, all these things to transform the company into a better serving company to their clients. And when this was done, a transformation took place inside the company, and these policies and training and incentives were turned into a better performance. So that was the output, higher quality customer service. So as you can see, any system analysis is going to focus on inputs, transformations, and outputs, whether it be your own system analysis, which you're going to do, or if you ever did an organizational analysis in the future, you would also focus on inputs, transformations, and outputs in order to understand the whole system. So I want you to think about this after you get done with this workshop and reflect a little more so that you understand how this principle works and how it might be influencing your own subsystems. including the psychological component, which is what we're going to deal with next. So if you turn to page 7, you'll see that as you're completing your self-analysis, you're going to be employing some psychological measures to understand a small segment of your psychological subsystem. And when you use these measures, I want you to be aware of how these instruments actually break you down. That is your whole. It breaks you down into smaller parts. So for example, when you take the Myers-Briggs, your personality is being fragmented into parts. The assessment is going to divide you into being a thinker versus a feeler, an introvert versus an extrovert, and so forth. So when you analyze these results of these measures, whether it be the Myers-Briggs or some other measure, I want you to think about how these scores are accurate in regards to your whole self and how they're inaccurate in describing you. Further, I want you to think about how these reductionistic results limit the portrayal of who you really are, because these instruments don't really measure the emergent effect of all your subsystems, which composes your whole being. Remember, all these subsystems are in a hierarchy, and this hierarchy forms a whole, which is you. Now, to give you a greater understanding about reductionism versus holism and how that plays into these psychological measures, I want you to watch this video, Psychology, Issues, and Debates, Holism and Reductionism. So we're going to go ahead and shut off this video so you can click on this link, watch that video, and then return to the workshop. So you saw how the psychological measures are actually reductionistic because it breaks it down really into a small component to understand one aspect. But remember, so if you're measuring your motivational level or your self-efficacy, that's one aspect, but those things don't operate in isolation. Everything about you emerges as a whole, and so they're all interacting. So it's very hard for a psychological measure to measure everything that's going on into a human behavior, and that's why they have limitation. Now, in contrast to a psychological instrument that attempts to isolate one aspect of your personality in order to define how you behave, an astrological chart actually illustrates a more complex analysis. And I use this not to convert you into an astrology thinker or not. It's really irrelevant whether you believe in it or not. I want you to use the astrological chart as an illustration of how to look at something more complex. Because really, when astrology is more than a sun sign. If you don't know anything about astrology, you might think it's very simple. It actually isn't. And in order to give you a fundamental understanding of it, for the purpose of really to get you to think holistically rather than on a reductionistic level, I uncovered 2 short videos that I want you to watch. Now, these videos will not make you an expert in astrology, nor is that my goal, but you'll see the complexity of astrology that mirrors the intricacy of human systems. So go ahead, and if you turn to page 10, I want you to go ahead and stop this video, and you're going to watch the 12 houses birth charts and how to read a birth chart to get a little more understanding of the complexities of how astrology looks at human nature, which deals with many aspects of a whole. And if you have time, you also might want to watch this video under the extra tidbit. Now, while these 2 are shorter videos, this one's an hour. So for those who don't want to watch the extra tidbit video, that's fine. That's an optional. But please go ahead and watch these 2, and then let's come back to the workshop. Okay, so both astrologers and systems thinkers would actually agree that all living systems have a purpose. And so now we're going to discuss the power of purpose, because really purpose is what guides people's actions and are influenced by what you value. Purpose, while it guides a system as a whole, within the system there could be multiple purposes going on. So you could have a main purpose for living, and you could have sub-purposes. And those purposes can create conflict. So while the overall system may be guided by a main purpose, the subsystems possess conflicting purposes, and then that creates tension within the system and also conflict, which affects how you behave. Thus, it's vital to have all your parts in alignment if you can, because then that way you would actually be focused together and in sync in accomplishing your purpose. Now, the only way to be in sync is to really understand yourself, and that's one of the reasons too for doing your self-analysis, to see how all these parts play a role and how the subsystems might actually come with different purposes. Now, purpose, besides driving you as an individual, also drives relationships. So, for example, one person in a relationship may just want a friendship, while another may want a more intimate affair. So you can see how two people come together with different purposes. Now remember, if you're in a relationship, the relationship overall is the whole system, and the subsystems, the two main subsystems, would be the two people within the relationship. So clearly in this example, these two systems have conflicting purposes that will manifest as conflict, because one person wants a friendship, one person wants a more intimate relationship. This is critical how they resolve it, because the purpose is also going to relate to how they define their system. Are we boyfriend and girlfriend, or are we just friends? Now, besides purpose driving relationships and couples and individuals, it also drives organizations. And to illustrate this point is a video that looks at purpose and how it drives behavior in a business situation. So go ahead and shut off this video so that you can click on this link and watch the video on business, how purpose drives businesses. So as you can perceive from all the above information, in order for a system to realize and manifest its purpose successfully, it has to know what it values. And this is one of the main reasons why you'll be analyzing yourself extensively in terms of what you value when you complete your self-analysis. Okay, so now if you turn to page 9, we're going to talk about environmental factors and feedback loops. As you recognize, no system lives in isolation, and this is especially true for human beings. Everything we do and the context that we operate in, along with the people that we interact, are going to influence us in some manner. Dr. Welsh illustrates the impact of how outside environmental factors, such as the people we interact with, how it affects our mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual selves. So let's go ahead and stop this video so we could click on this link and watch this video. So as you can see, people and context that we interact within can either amplify us or diminish us in certain ways, which can be either positive or negative. And that's where those feedback loops come in. So for example, if Jane likes to spend money and she interacts with people who squander money, then her behavior is likely to be amplified, which may lead her into going into debt. Now in contrast, if Jane intermingled with penny pinchers, then her spendthrift ways are likely to lessen from their influences, so it would diminish her behaviors. Now, and again, that might be good, that might be bad. It might be bad in the sense of then she becomes cheap and nobody likes her. You know, just because something is amplified or diminished isn't necessarily positive or negative. It depends on what is the result as a consequence of that. So in order to see how environmental systems influence us, it's wise to understand the types of feedback loops that these interactions are creating. Therefore, as part of your system analysis on yourself, you'll be examining the external environment you interact with. That may include many types of people and environments, whether it be family, friends, work, church, school, volunteer efforts, cultural norms, and so forth. So to refresh your memory about feedback loops, I don't know if you recall the video that you watched earlier in the semester, but you may want to watch it again. And if you do, the link is here at the bottom of page 9. That is our lesson for today. You learned about the 4 main subsystems comprising you and how these subsystems influence each other. You specifically saw how the 7 chakras can pinpoint emotional issues that are manifesting physically within the body. Further, you enhanced your knowledge about the system's principle of input, transformation, and output, which helps you describe how you internalize external events, process them, and emit various types of outputs back into the environment. Moreover, you learn the differences between holistic versus reductionistic thinking and how psychological assessments are naturally reductionistic, thus limiting how to describe you as a person or your whole. You also learned on a general level how astrological charts are holistic, and as a result makes them, understanding them, a little more complex. You also learned the purpose that drives action. Purpose drives action, and it's critical to all living things, including individuals, relationships, and organizations. And lastly, you learned that environmental systems surrounding you, they directly impact your whole through positive and negative feedback loops. Now that you've enhanced your systems thinking and understanding of how system principles influence you in the relationships you are in, next week you'll be working on and completing your self-analysis. And after doing so, you'll see how multifaceted one system is and realize when analyzing relationships, organizations, or communities, the complexities become even greater.